So it came finally the time that I can talk about the boomers. The fucking boomers. The terrible people. Those people behind all the mess we've been forced through. Even my microphone moved by itself. Hmm? Said the microphone. Did the microphone. So the boomers. Where do I even start? With the size of the mess that they put us through. You see, first, there's a distinction. Because I heard some people say, oh, boomer is a state of mind, not a generation thing. Bullshit. And here's why. Because a generation behaved in a certain clear manner. It is a generational issue. My generation has absolutely nothing to do with it. In fact, like ex-Jenna. In fact, we've been their first victims. We were absolute innocent to the amount of selfishness and evil those people are capable of because they're being selfish. Extremely selfish. We suffered first their hypocrisy. They beat us up at the same time they were coming with this whole, oh, you should be peaceful and loving and daring and everyone is equal and everyone is kind and everything is love and peace. But we fuck you up, we hit you with a belt if you go against our will. You do as I say, not as I tell you. I literally heard that from grown-ups, from boomer grown-ups. So we were the first victims of their hypocrisy. And we are still recovering, folks. We're still recovering. That's how brutal, how severe this hypocrisy from the boomers is. We took it first hand. They refined their methods on us. How can you say that about an entire generation? Look, if there are people out there who can say, more capitalism is this and this and that, without even knowing what the word means, and I have to say it because they don't know. Oh, are you advocating in pro-capitalism? Are you a capitalist? Check my material in the web. I'm definitely not one, okay? That doesn't make me anything else either. I am someone who is trying to figure out new ways. I'm trying to figure out ways out of this entire madness. Because what we have currently is madness. I've been raised in chaos. Enough of this. So what do you suggest we do? First, we have to figure out the problems. Then we figure out how, like, we have to find the root of the problems. Then we have to figure out how to solve them. I caught one of the problems, hopefully the only problem. So I can talk about how to fix it. How can you say that about an entire generation? You're generalizing. Hey, if you can generalize and say, oh, it's a mindset, it's not a generational thing. Well, you're generalizing. It's not. It is a generational thing. It is a mindset of an entire generation. Let's put it that way. It started with their first revolts, with their first screams and shouts of, it's forbidden to forbid, which is great if they really meant it. So with that war cry, they fired up an entire revolution, cultural revolution, into our society. It is forbidden to forbid. So I can have sex with whomever I want, and let's face it, it's not a job that was well done by previous generations, where they were still being shunned and young women were being like teenagers, to put it in a way you can better understand in the current language, teenagers that many people somehow tend to believe are children, which they are not. Teenagers were being thrown out of their homes if they got pregnant because their very loving and endearing family found out they were pregnant. And somehow they were loving, but love didn't cover that. So they were cast out in the wilderness, they were cast out in the streets, in the mud. If it was raining, sun, they didn't care because they were whores suddenly. So what do we do when your entire family calls you a whore? Well, you go into a whorehouse, right? Because you're hungry and you need to eat and you need to survive. So since your family shunned you and they don't want anything to do with you, and they beat you up and they would beat you up again if you dare ever coming back to them. So much about the love, huh? So much about that Christian love, huh? Um, they would end up in a whorehouse. So that was the destiny of women then who got pregnant. So, with that in mind, they were justified with the forbidden to forbid thing. So, what did they do? They protested, they went naked, took off the clothes. Again, something that I know from previous generations, pre boomer or boomer, and I give them some credit. Because everything before that was shame, shame. Everything was shame. You couldn't kiss a boy, it was shame. You couldn't kiss a girl, it was shame. You couldn't go dancing, it was a shame. Uh, and all that. It was just shame over everything, like the religious thing that they broke from. Fair enough. So they were justified to start with. But then things started taking an interesting turn. So they managed to break free and they managed to bring about all those freedoms into society, and they protested with the war in Vietnam. They protested, the boomers protested against the war, and they fired up the hippie movement, peace and love, love and peace, and make love not war, which I highly recommend. It's a good rule to live by if this indeed was what they intended. And they start having orgies, and homosexuality was very common. Most of those people discriminating highly against the boomers, that is, the previous generation to the X-Geners, that is, who were discriminating, who are currently discriminating against homosexuality, they were doing both sides of the alley, if you get what I mean. Um, so that was just part of their daily life, homosexuality, bisexuality. They did whatever they wanted. They lived however they wanted. They did whom they wanted. They did whatever they wanted. They had probably some of the best teenager times of all times. So they managed to bring freedom to the society, and end of shame. And shame suddenly was something that was being ridiculed with a certain amount of reason. Because if you kick a young woman out of your house just because she got pregnant, claiming you love her, that's wrong. Regardless, that's wrong. It's your daughter, you have a responsibility. You failed your daughter because you either weren't able to make her understand why she should be very selective about the people who she has relationships with, or you failed because you created a person that is completely innocent and was a victim of a bad person, or someone, if not bad, who took advantage of her innocence that you instituted, that you created, you shaped. That's a responsibility as a parent, is to properly warn against all evils of the world and prepare your kids to what they might face, even if they don't face it. Don't scare them, but make them aware. Learn, research, ask people. You don't just overprotect them because we all know the results. Like there are religions that are founded in that. You know? Overprotected family gives to children wanting to try it. If you tell them no, but you don't explain until you can see that they're completely understanding of why not, it's like you are telling them to do it, literally. Hey, don't eat that fruit. Don't eat that apple. But why? Because I don't want you to. Telling that to a human. But anyway, unless the person doesn't have an inch of self-worth, they will try it. Anyway, if you don't properly explain why and show what happens and all that. But anyway, so suddenly they were free and then they could do everything they wanted. And then they grew up and they also became in charge. They slowly but surely were raising to the ranks. So they start dropping the whole orgy and stuff and started instituting or stipulating new rules and regulations themselves. Um, because apparently societies don't work without some. So they created this new reality and they shaped this reality. And what did they do with it? Did they continue to preach it's forbidden to forbid? No, because once they became parents, then they clashed with certain realities that you cannot really raise a child properly in just saying, "Sure, kid, whatever you want, baby, here you are." Oh, you want to stick a fork in the in the contract? Oh, why not? No, it's not how you raise your child. So they quickly learned that, but then they were lost because they have convinced themselves that it's forbidden to forbid, and they clashed with their own self. Probably, I'm guessing, if they have a speck of self conscience, which I'm not sure actually they would. But anyway, because of the things they're doing now. So now they have absolute power to do anything they want. Did they give the new generations absolute freedom? No. Now they are censoring. They want to censor all the new generations from doing all the things that they did, that they demanded. They want to ban and forbid, and if anybody complains, they censor the web. They censor the entire web. They're indoctrinating kids to learn completely wrong things that backfire, that don't work, as if they are right just because they say so. Just because they know better when they don't want to know really. Don't do as I do, do as I tell you. Oh, I heard that so many times from the boomers. If you want a slogan for the boomer insult, for this whole image that is being built around boomers, here's one. Don't do as I do, do as I tell you. That should be their motto. Not the it's forbidden to forbid, because they are against it. They are against it. But don't do as I did, do as I tell you. That's their motto. And I remember the people saying that while they were punishing me, they were laughing and mentioning that. Yeah, that's what my generation went through. So when you compare us, when you call us boomer, you are insulting us by default. Because we know what we've been through in the hands of those fascists, those hypocritic old people. Oh, we are all love and peace, but fucking hell, I'll take my belt off and hit you with it if you dare going against me. Or what I believe, what I want to do. What? Me? I never did anything. They're caught hand-read or red-handed. Oh, I never did anything. No, I'm not doing this that I'm currently doing right here, right now. And you better not do it. Then you realize, what the fuck? But that's something related to that generation, X-Geners. We only like basically three things: good music, breaking stuff, and having sex on the floor. That's it. You want to define the ex genus? Those are the three things we live by. So that's pretty much it. And all this mess that we currently have, the censorship and all this, I completely understand why the millennials have an issue, and they created boomer as to indicate those old people there that, and they are still trying to define it. They will, as millennials usually do, as it was with the cuck thing. They will eventually get tired of it because their attention span, not their fault, not their fault. The boomers taught them in the educational system. Don't even get me started in the educational system that we currently have that could have been different. The boomers could have just said, you know what? This educational system is completely wrong. We just should get rid of it. Get rid of it. Go back to the 5 obligatory years that you will learn how to read, write, if you come from a poor environment where the parents don't teach it for their own kids, like I did to mine, and they kind of forgotten when they got into the school system, they forgot how to add and subtract that they already knew. They forgot that because they had to go with the curricula. And I'm talking about very good schools. Don't get me wrong, they are awesome schools. Now they are finally learning it again, but they already knew that. But the 5 years there where you would learn to read, write, add, subtract, like the basic mathematical calculation, and a tad bit of history and perhaps some language, but history and how to behave in society and stuff, and you were off. Then, if you did well, you that was before the boomers. Um, if you did well, then you will go right straight into university. So it was the boomers who came with this whole teenager thing that you have to call a young person as a teenager. You see, uh, the young person couldn't start their life at a young age. That's a taboo. No, they're still children, although they cannot drink. They, like as children shouldn't. But hey, you can send them to die for us, the boomers who are now in power and won't let you do things because we call you a child, but you can go and die in our wars. Yes, folks. In most countries, people can go to war before they are legal age of consent, but they are not treated as adults. They can't do half of the things that an adult can. When in generations previous to the boomers, teenagers were already started to be treated as grown-ups and would already, like, they would usually start a family life. Most of your grandparents were living like that. So if you think there's something wrong, there are, I don't know how many thousand years of our society, the society that now I see many millennials aspiring to with traditional society and all that. People traditionally in our society married around 15. 15 was the age where the girls would be introduced into society. They will have that beautiful ball done in their name and their to celebration of their age, where they would be introduced to society proper. Why or what for? To get married, to start a proper family, as people should. And currently, the millennials are admiring this, and it should be admired. The search for equivalent person in your affective life should be a must. Someone who is worthy of your company and who you are worthy of their company, to start a life together, not by the volition of your parents, but by your own volition. But the very nature of ourselves as animals should be a must. We should start a family life early. We should start loving early when our bodies are ready, when we are ready, as it used to be. So it's beautiful in that way that the millennials, they are starting to realize, hey, we are missing something big here. But they don't know because they're being bamboozled. They're confused at the same time because the boomers did everything they could to confuse everyone. So, not because it's right, not because it's proper, but because they have more power. In that way, they have more power. Hey, you know all those crazy things we did as teenagers? Yeah, we went beyond. We went beyond. And we added drugs to it, and we added God knows what. Let's make it illegal. Because by making it illegal, if we can control people literally by their balls, literally by their balls, if we can prevent them from doing things that humankind has always naturally done for ages, we control them all. If we can control their instinctive natural urges, we control them all. And currently, there's a lot of indoctrination going on in that sense. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, hey, go womanizing teenage girls. No, that's pretty much one of the things that is absolutely wrong in our society currently. But you just, no, what I said is completely different. What I said, hey, if you fall in love with someone, you should start your life, be selective, but don't go fucking around. That's something the boomers also created. Oh, let's fuck around. And then when they started getting venereal diseases because of it, oh, how to the condom. Let's use condoms. Condoms solve all the problems by magic. No, it doesn't. But let me just finish that thought. I'm not saying go around having sex with teenagers. No, I'm not endorsing that. That's one of the things that is pretty wrong in our society. Don't go fucking around. Search for someone that matches absolutely what you idealize in a woman. Be selective. By being selective, it doesn't mean you have to fuck them. It kind of means pretty much the other way around. Don't fuck them. Pay attention. Because you're going to stick your thing in there and you're going to get connected. You might. It's not everybody that falls in love and believes even in love and all that. But you might have kids out of it. So be careful. Because that's a big responsibility. Hey, the boomers thought of it all, didn't they? No, use condom. Then you don't need to worry. Which is bullshit. You do. Like, you still do. The condom can burst and God knows what. And you still get venereal diseases, regardless of how much condom you use. If you put condoms all over your body and in the tips of your fingers, you still get venereal diseases. It doesn't solve the venereal disease problem. You can get venereal diseases by several means. The major is being in constant contact with people that have them. It doesn't matter how much condom you use. Because there are several ways you can catch it, regardless of condom. Which proves in the 90s, in comparison to the 80s, in the 90s, the amount of sexually transmitted diseases, at least in countries like advanced countries like Scandinavia, was 660%. It rose 660% in comparison to the 80s. Because they teach in schools that instead of having kids, you should use condom. Instead of choosing someone to have kids with, someone proper, someone who could definitely be the parent, if you aren't. That's an interesting rhyme. If you to choose someone who could be a parent if you definitely aren't. If things go wrong, that's what I mean in a relationship. That should be a concern. No, they teach kids, oh, no, just use condom. have random sex with people you don't know who can be crazy, who can stalk you and be a plague in your life, who might even, accuse you of raping although it was consent. As today it's becoming a problem. Like guys in universities today are not, they don't want to touch the women in the university, and the women are getting concerned. Hey, why don't you like? Because some women, I'm not saying all, of course, but hashtag not all, but most women would like to meet a guy they love in university because same level, kind of same level, like if not above theirs, but them being in university, and not because they are not in the same level because she's a woman. No, I'm talking about social classes. If you happen to believe it, then believe the whole story. So if she comes from a poor social class and she meets some guy from a good family and all that, like, chance of offspring or at least a better lifestyle in many ways might be possible. So that many women go to university with that idea of finding someone to fall in love with that has a university degree that's usually some degrees above hers. So she doesn't need to worry about a certain lots of things because let's be fair, it's not the man who has to carry a baby for over 9 months, and then 1 year after that, at least 1 year after that. I would say 3. And I'm a father of a family, I have plenty of kids, I can see for how long the kids really need you. Really, you need to be with them. Around at least 3 years in a row, constantly. So they can have a proper backbone and not have so many issues and become better people, or at least very confident people. And it's not easy. So you really need to be selective, and it shouldn't be random. But no, our society teaches people just to fuck around, and if anything, use a condom. No, and that's a typical boomer mindset, Oh, problem, quick fix. Teehee. I'm so smart. You can even be smart, but you're not really clever. There's a difference. So there we have it. The boomers then they started having venereal diseases, so they figured, let's fix it with condoms. And then they used condoms, and then the condoms would burst, and then they would say, let's have abortions. Never mind the fact that abortions carry with it a whole bag of problems to the woman and the man. And the man, there are consequences. I can attest to that. I've seen several friends who suffer. They ended their lives because of things that they done that they regret. Men and women. I've seen women because they aborted so many times, friends who constantly were not in touch anymore, but not because of that. They got married. I still know, like, why the hell, right? What's that guy doing here talking with you, darling? Uh, you know, so we are not in touch in that sense. So, perfectly logical. I wouldn't like it. Um, so, it carries with it a whole bag of problems. I heard some of the most horrific, ignorant comments from people who do not know what abortion is. Like they said, oh, getting rid of the fetus is like getting rid of a parasite. No, your body doesn't react in the same way. You don't get healthier when you get rid of a fetus. You actually you risk getting sick, and you usually do. And the more you do it, the more sick you will get, to the point that you won't even be able to have kids or even have kids properly. It will be extremely painful if you abort too much to even have a pregnancy, because the egg will start to try to avoid the whole thing. Your body will try to figure out a way of it. It doesn't work like it. We would still need a million years of evolution to being able to have, to escape the drugs that you put to kill the or whatever, to have it outside of the womb as it should. Like, it's crazy. Your body's trying to save your continuation, but your mind is just, you're being indoctrinated, you're being brainwashed to believe that a crime against humanity is somehow justifiable just because you were taught that fucking around is good, which isn't. There's several. I'm mentioning some already. Okay, venereal diseases as one of them. Nobody should enjoy it. That is not something to be proud about. It's a problem, and you can get really sick, and you can even die of it, and you can become impotent or incapable of having sex altogether. So it defeats the purpose of the whole idea of having random sex in the first place. And this is why I'm pointing that out. You can do whatever you want. I can't stop you. But I can make you aware if you really want to be aware. And I'm saying it might not be a good idea. Again, family life is not for everyone. It's not for everyone. But it's highly recommended. It helps you more than it causes problems. The way it is today, because what happened with this whole fucking around and we get rid and we don't have kids and we abort, then what happened? The consequence of that is that the population numbers start dwindling down. And then the boomers were already in power when the population numbers start dwindling down because they were not having kids, they were not having children, and they needed people in the workforce. They needed new breed, the unexperienced, the forced to work under them, and they didn't have it because not enough children were being born because they couldn't give a fuck. They couldn't care less about that. They just wanted to fuck around because it felt good. So, short-sighted generation, the boomers. Short-sighted. That's another word for them. So what happened? So the numbers were dwindling. What did they do? How did they try to fix it? Ooh, let's bring people from abroad. Let's bring a lot of foreigners and people from several cultures. Several cultures are beautiful and all this thing. Never mind the fact that the people who say actually live in a talk about being against class society. They are one of the most class-based societies to the point that some people, I heard it's changing, but some people cannot, the shadow of some people cannot cross others because of class. Talk about class. Well, this culture somehow, the strong class fixed society is basically slavery, is being promoted in our culture as something beautiful and what we all should aspire to. Because one man, Gandhi, promoted peace, a man who, by the way, was killed, and a man who initially refused the invitations, saying, "But I'm too English. The Hindus won't understand me." And who was proven right. By the way, that shows his intellect. Because he was proven right. Because he was shot dead by the Hindus who didn't understand him. Because he was too English. Like the mindset, culturally, European. Too open, too liberal, too, like individualistic. So they shot him. Not the Muslims, whom, by the way, fully supported him. He was shot by the nationalists. Are you telling me this is not what happened? So be careful with the kind of people you want to promote. Because they're going to do it. They don't give a fuck. First time you cross them, regardless, left or right, that's the problem with playing identity politics. is that eventually you will cross a line with one of those two, whomever is in charge. Not the center. Center, majority of people wanting to stay alive and survive and have a good life. Something to be proud of without ideological dribble. But either the left or the right, whenever they are in power, at some point you can agree with them in a lot of stuff. You can put them in power. You can be one of the names they will remember forever. But at some point, you will cross a line with them, and they will do something about it. And it won't be kind and loving. No matter what you think that you've done for them, they don't give a. They will do what they need to do to keep their prejudices going, whatever they choose to call it. So the boomers, that's the topic. To try to fix the problem of probably, I don't know, don't have a book about it. I haven't done much research about it, but the boomers, you know, based on what we've seen so far, we can only conclude that since they were the ones in charge then and they were the ones who came with those ideas, they decided to bring in the immigrants. And then they started whole campaigns that I, as a teenager, saw and went through and believed. Oh, let's bring immigrants and beautiful multiculturalism and all this culture, whatever that means. If you check what multiculturalism means, actually means, you might get a shock. It's not what you probably believe it to be. Let's bring them all in and all that. Well, then they bring them all in. Then they cast those people into our societies, and those people get the massive, huge cultural shock. They come from places that they believe that they go to hell if they look at someone or if they piss in a wrong direction. Literally, some people that come from those places actually believe it. It will be like, not like, because they are allowed by some religions to be much more violent than we are, but it would be something similar to, very bland, to get some hillbillies, you know, who believed Jesus, and then they are thrown into Los Angeles. They are forced to move, or they are led, like they're paid to move to Los Angeles, and it doesn't matter how much money you feed them. They have all those prejudices. They have all those crazy ideas, those outdated concepts that they were raised on, that will clash with the reality the first 1,000 times they meet someone. They meet a man dressed in a woman's dress in the street that comes to them and asks them for the time, or even flirt with them because they are into some kind of kink. Um, those people will react accordingly. You're Satan, and that kind of stuff. And in those religions, they are allowed to be even more violent. They are prone to violence against those people. That's the way they try to figure how to solve those things. So, and they've been doing that much more than a hillbilly that usually fled a Scandinavian country that usually was kind of very open-minded in comparison. They were doing that for 1,000 years previous, not a couple of 100 years, 1,000 years. It's embedded probably in their genetics even. And you pushed a lot of those people at once in places that people can go naked to the beach, that you see naked in TV, in kids' hours, and it's okay. But if you are on the beach, you can do as I did, like I heard from families that were on the beach naked. Um, there was a boy that ran in front of a girl there, and he was wearing shorts, and she wasn't. Then she asked, "Oh, Daddy, why is he wearing shorts?" And the dad just answered, "Oh, it's because he's ashamed of his dick." So you bring that culture that everything is a shame, everything is forbidden, everything you have to kill with a rock or whatever. You need to give lashes to women if they are raped so that they can get it. Uh, and you throw them into a society that's, oh, you're not showing your dick, you must be ashamed of it. uh, there's a cultural shock. So the boomers created a cultural clash. Another one, this time very dangerous. So they created a new cultural clash that is now destroying our entire world, literally. All because they wanted a quick fix. So regardless of the research that was done, and there was done research where they figured that if there are wars that were caused by the boomers, mind you, the boomer generation started most of those wars in the Middle East, in Africa, and all that. Boomers. Boomers all over it. Since the 60s, those wars have been happening. Since they fixed their boots into the business and grown up world, we are having those proxy wars over and over and over and over. So the boomers created that. All those wars. It started with Iran. That then was called Kingdom of Persia. That was beautiful. People were occidentalized. The women, beautiful women, were occidentalized. Loose, beautiful black, pitch black hair. Strong, beautiful hair. Persian women have a very distinct breast shape. It's very easy to recognize. And a body type. It's very beautiful. Although I prefer tall women, but you get the point. So it was literally the boomers who forced the Persians to become Iranians, who pushed this whole agenda of the religious agenda in Iran. That back then it was as occidentalized as it could be in that region. They destroyed it. The boomers destroyed it. It was not the generation previous to the boomers. It were the boomers who destroyed it. And they're destroying the entire world because they just want a quick fix to everything. They want their money right here and right now. It doesn't matter if it destroys the entire world. They are going to get it. And they get it. Why? Because they're crazy. They are selfish to an extreme that haven't ever been seen before. And I can't really point out why. To the point that I'm even considering checking into astrology to actually try to figure out why. Because it can't really be explained. And you want to know what astrology has to say about it, and that's mostly amusing. The boomers, they are actually Pluto in Leo. Pluto in Leo line. Because generations, according to astrology, are based in the star signs as everything, actually. But not that you need to believe it, but I'm just saying what an odd coincidence. Leo, because Leo in the astrological sense, although I never personally had issues with Leo, actually they like me a lot, but they are known for being very self-centered. You understand? Like egocentric, self-centered. And call it coincidence, but there seems to have a parallel there, a connection there, because, and I don't get it, because the generation previous was actually Pluto in Cancer. So they should have been great parents, in a way. And that explains also the whole shame thing that they had. But coincidence is right. Back to the topic, just to give you a hint what astrology had to say about it, because I checked. Usually when I talked about something here, I checked it in several sources, even the most absurd ones. So the boomers once again They fired up this whole mess that we have now in the Middle East, basically. Because they wanted a quick fix, they wanted more money, they wanted for their business, they wanted more control, more control. So the conclusion I'm getting is that the boomers are about control. They want all control to themselves in a very selfish manner, in a very individualistic, not positive manner, in a very destructive way, like a spoiled brat. Like a spoiled brat. They just want everything, and if they don't have it, they throw a hissy fit. And unfortunately, because they are the ones sitting in charge, hopefully soon to retire, the last ones of the boomer generation hopefully will go away and retire, and then they will demand their pensions. Believe me, there's big things coming now when they start retiring. They will demand incredible things. They will probably, a little before the last ones retire, they will probably create laws that will criminalize you not visiting. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy now. But based in all the previous evidence, as crazy as it might sound what I'm about to tell you, it might just as well happen. Because that's the kind of crazy stuff they did so far. So I don't doubt they do that too. They will probably criminalize not visiting your parents. And they will stipulate how many times you have to visit your parents a year. And if you don't do that, and if you are not nice to your parents, it doesn't matter how much they beat you up while they were laughing and saying, don't do as I do, do as I tell you. Because you are absolute under my control, so I'm going to show you how really evil I can be. Despite the whole, I'm so enlightened, we are seeking for enlightenment. Enlightenment, my, that's talk to get laid. They will probably create laws that forbid you from not visiting your parents or relatives or previously responsible for you. They will stipulate penalties, and it will probably usually be financial penalties. You have to pay them some amount of money for compensation or some crazy thing like that. It will come. Get ready, because they're starting to retire. So it's coming. They will start to demand visitation from their offspring. And penalties if you don't, financial penalties. But back to, like, I'm putting the, like, so you can see they've done more. It started with Persia, then it went along to other countries, then suddenly all the countries around the world that they needed some goods for their businesses, they got it. For their governments, even worse, they got it, and they are getting, and they transformed the educational system, and they're still transforming it to be just a cash cow for the most incompetent of their generation that have not retired yet. So we are going to have that horrible educational system that we currently have until the last one of them retire from aforementioned educational system. That is horrifying, that is causing all the mess that we have, the confusion, the ignorant people. And what are they doing? What are the boomers doing? They are blaming the millennials. They are blaming a generation, another generation, that has been under their absolute control, under their educational system, under their education, under their rule, under their admissions, They are blaming them for what they, the boomers, did wrong. For a failed, horrifying, jail-like, light jail educational system. By the way, if you say, oh, but they removed the physical punishment for them, so they wouldn't be physically punished. No, there are schools that still practice it in some of the most liberal places you can ever imagine in the world. Physical punishment is still being practiced. I've seen even they have special, I call them torture chambers, like special rooms to isolate children so they can beat them up there and punish them and God knows what. I even heard of electrical shock, but they're doing that. And because they messed up the entire educational system, and I'm against physical punishment, it shouldn't be. But it shouldn't be for everybody. So what did they do? Oh, we are having problems, like the kids can stand still because it's completely like against our humanity to be sitting down for so long without nothing happening really. And after all, no children left behind, so we need to be very dull and boring and make sure that the retarded kids that shouldn't be in school, they should be in special treatment. And in several countries they are not. If they happen to be in the US, well done. In the other countries, no. They're put together in the educational system because it's enforced and every child is obliged and blah blah blah. It sounds so good in paper, doesn't it? That's typical boomer thing. Now, sounds good in paper, I'm doing it. Not me, you see. I want others to do it. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. You know, like the boomers, they created places like Lolita Island. That's a boomer thing. You know, if you have an issue with teen prostitution, oh, you know, you should be there trying to shut it down then, because it's still ongoing. The guy's not in jail, is he? So, and he still owns the island, and it's still ongoing. The teenager prostitutes are still there. Like, as far as I know, I could be completely wrong, but this is still going on. So, you see, they break the laws. They do whatever they want to do, and you know, they just ah, it's so hypocritical. So, what did they do with those children that are misbehaving? They in places that they are not being punished physically still. Oh, they created new laws that allowed the teachers to drug them. Children are being drugged to sit quietly in class. That completely destroys their psyche, that destroys their brain, that rewires it. All because the boomers don't give a damn what happens to you. They want quiet, they get quiet. They want naked, they get naked. They want prostitution, they get prostitution. Like those laws in the US, oh, prostitution is forbidden. But if you have a camera and you film it, it's not prostitution. The boomers are hypocrites. I'm not saying all boomers, hashtag not all. But that generation is a generation of hypocrites. What they've done to this world will have consequence for decades, perhaps centuries. There is no return. The amount of countries that have been destroyed because of boomer greed. Right now, we are taking the best from countries in development and bringing them to Europe in the hopes that they fix our economy, which they won't. And now it's showing. The majority of them, what do they choose? They don't choose to work. They choose to ride the system. And then what do the boomers do? They punish the locals. If they need, indeed, the rights that they were given by generations previous to the boomers, not the boomers. The boomers are taking all the civic rights that other generations have given us, they're taking it. Because suddenly it's a burden for them. Now that they are the power, now that they are in charge, now they are the administration, they're taking it away. Everything. Because they want everything. And they don't give a damn about you. Or any generation after theirs. It's their generation that they care about. And their generation is currently in charge. And their generation is the one who is ruining everything for everyone. Non-stop. Mercilessly. And they don't care. And then they hire those cheap tokens that they can throw there to entertainment, to try to get away with their hypocrisy, to root for their ideals of punishment and censorship and everything that they claim to be against when they were young. Now they are demanding it with extra. And it's sad to see. Because this is what is happening. That generation is destroying everything that was built for everyone. They are ruining everything. They are still ruining everything. And they will continue to ruin everything. And God forbid they retire, you'll see the new rules that are coming. And I seriously hope that my generation wake up and smell the coffee. I can see already some people from my generation their heads start popping up. Because so far we were forced to pay for the whole mess. And we've been under such heavy indoctrination. Because they knew what they were doing. And we were their children. We didn't have a clue. And to get out of this whole thing is a big, massive process. And it takes years in mental hell, spiritual hell, to realize how badly you've been had as a kid. But some of us, the ones who survive, are seemingly getting the grasp of it. But it's hard. Because now we are being patched together, probably as a buffer zone, by the boomers, to take the heat for what they done wrong. And they did apparently everything wrong, that we will now have to try to fix if we still survive all the natural consequences of their catastrophes. So it didn't stop there, you see. So now they're drugging kids. The boomers are drugging kids so they can have them still in class, so they can do their thing, get their check at the end of the month until their retirement. So they're drugging kids, if necessary, so they can just have their paycheck. It doesn't matter if the kids are going to be ruined. It doesn't matter if the kid is going to have their brains dissolved in some acidic drug that destroys the neurological system. It doesn't matter for the boomers. They need their paycheck. Give me my paycheck. Here, making the kid steal. Here, kid, have some drugs that we experienced with back in our days, and we concluded those are the most effective to shutting people up. Here, take it. Oh, you don't want to take it? Oh, fellow boomers, Let's create some laws and regulations that make sure that we, as non-parents, have the power to drug kids in schools so they can shut up and we can have our paycheck. Yeah, yeah, that's very good. Let's all have paychecks. Paychecks is good. So we can buy our own drugs and we can do whatever we want. We can go to Thailand and to other countries where child prostitution will do all the sick stuff that we claim to be morally standing against. Let's do that. Let's vote. You have now, fellow boomer, the right to drug children in class so they can shut up, destroy their minds so they don't have any resistance, so you get your paycheck too because you're a fellow boomer like we are. Here's your paycheck. Shut them up. The drugs. Force it. The boomers literally can force drugs down the child's throat against their parents' will, against every sense of empathy for a fellow human being, regardless of the save the plants, save the bees, save the trees. Here's some drug, you mother. Let me now get my paycheck and everybody shut up. That's a boomer, and I understand why this is becoming a bad slang. I just hope it doesn't go away as fast as cock did. Because it shouldn't. They should be reminded. Humanity should be reminded of this entire generation that ruined us all, is ruining us, is still ruining us. And you will see when the last of them get their retirement, they won't leave us alone. They will demand people to go and visit them, and they will punish by court, by lawyers, by whatever means they have their kids, proving once again that they don't care about the happiness of anybody in the world but their own. And not even because it makes them happy. It makes them feel in charge. They are in control. So talk about all the things that they have projected in my generation and now they are projecting in the next generation that they want to project in the millennials. And there might be a reason why they want to project it in the millennials specifically, because the X generation was ruined. They ruined us. They ruined us. The Y generation, they also ruined. They bankrupted them. They bankrupted the Y generation beyond belief. They made them hard workers because, or suicidal. Actually, something my generation kind of escaped from. I think because we were still too strong. We learned to say fuck you and actually smash some heads. But the Y generation, they were taught to be hard workers. They work hard. Why? Somebody has to pay the checks for the boomers, right? And now the millennials, they're getting the short end of the stick. Then there might be some other reasons why. I think the millennials might be, as they're saying, woke. Like they might be a generation that is kind of running, or it's so obvious what the boomers do in that specific generation that they can even drug them. That makes them an enemy by default, like the boomers. The previous generation to mine makes the boomers their natural enemies because they are the kids who are having an adult literally stuffing drugs down their throat. They are seeing, if it is not with them directly, they are seeing their little colleagues, their best friends there, that in some classes they are actually even not allowed to have anymore for some odd reason, just because boomers can, so they do it. They are seeing their fellow best friends being drugged against their will in class. So of course you have some level of resentment against that generation. And no, it's not a mindset alone. It's a generational mindset that my generation don't share. We don't share that. We are starting to realize how badly we've been had. And we've been conditioned so heavily, and we have, that it's really hard for us to fight against it. It will take us some time still before we can actually fight back because of the conditioning we suffered. But they are criticizing and blaming and calling what they did to every generation. They are calling now the millennials the dumb, they're misinformed, they don't know anything and all. Why? They are preparing that generation to pay their pensions. That's why. So they are trying to crack down, to destroy absolutely their self-confidence as a generation. It's a generational thing that the boomers are doing. And it's sad to watch, and something needs to be done. But me from X-Gen, we don't really know how even, because like if we need to get a job, we need to be completely at the hands of them, at least for the first decade. We have no choice. If we want to be self-sufficient, we are also under the same scope, because we need to abide to their rules and their regulations. And until we can change all that, they will need to go into retirement. But then they will probably create things in laws that makes it almost impossible to change those things in a way that only they can do. So we are kind of clueless. We will need, the X-Geners will need the next generations to help us to rebuild everything from scratch, probably, because currently everything is getting ruined. The consequences of all their misdeeds are just piling up. Academia is destroyed in many places, and it's still growing and growing into the whole system. Academia is destroyed. So the seat of knowledge of our entire civilization has been polluted. Like, it's being corrupted. It's being ruined. So we will need to figure out new ways, new problems, new ways to deal with problems. Because the boomers, they ruined everything in their self-indulgence. They ruined everything. They really did. And they are now trying to blame another generation, the millennials, because it bothers them, because they're probably feeling guilty, but as usual, instead of actually coping with their guilt, they are blaming everybody else but themselves. It almost makes them sound like sociopaths in a way. So yeah, this is the size of the problem. I could mention more stuff, but the video would be even longer. I think you get the point of how bad that generation was for the entirety of humankind. Like, we are in jeopardy right now. We are in big trouble because of that generation alone. My generation is going to need the help of the previous generations. My generation is broken. Like, the strongest of us are having a really hard time coping with living. Because if you don't become one of the sycophants of that generation, you're doomed. And they will ruin you. So that's the size of the problem that my generation has to fix. Like, I figured a little way out, at least for myself, by raising a family proper with better values, that hopefully will give them the conditions of having a better world in the long run. Long run. And that's what I could do so far. Me alone, by myself. But it will be a huge task for my generation, what remains of it, one that can fight back. We will probably not become the positions of power when they retire. They are going to make sure that we don't get it. Because, we might get vindictive. So they are going to make sure we don't get it. They're going to make sure to try to pass it to a generation that they manage to break down. So it's usually going to be the Y generation, because they are just horse work, literally workhorses. Yeah, workhorses. To think in another language, they are literally workhorses. The Y generation are workhorses. It's beautiful to watch it, but it's impressive. Why? Because they were the ones that didn't commit suicide. It was also a generation that committed a lot of suicides. Teenage suicides. Once they realized, oh my fucking god, I will have to work to pay for all this mess. They cut their wrists. So the ones who survived suicide and whom my generation managed to save as intermediary positions in society that can at least save some souls in the meanwhile, so they could see that the world might not be that bad. Here, kids, here's some good music. See, we can do good stuff. It's not only about being evil and destructive and having to work like a fucking maniac. No. You can have good music. Oh yes, you can have sex on the floor. Yeah, you can break shit if you want to break shit. So those few of my generation that managed to pass the message that you can actually do good stuff and be yourself, you need to work. They gave us no choice. But you can actually have a good time. My generation is a generation of having a good time when we can. When we are not forced to work to pay for the whole mess. So the ones we managed to save, who still will have to work, together with the millennials and the next generations, we have a chance of saving it. But it's going to be a hard fight because they haven't left power, and they are going to make sure they can even destroy it. Like, really, world war. Like, let's go out. What if they decide? Let's go out with a bang. Because after us, the deluge. What if they decide? They hold the keys. Not me, not my generation. They hold the keys. Like in countries like the US, do they have someone of the X generation in power? No! Their president is a boomer. They only electing boomers. The next presidents, the ones that are fighting for power in countries like the US, who are they? Bernie Sanders? Boomer. Biden? Boomer. The two biggest possible names that might have a chance, and others, in those next elections are boomers. It's going to be boomer against boomer. They are not letting my generation in power. They won't let, because they are afraid we might stop them. Because my generation was the superhero generation. It was the generation that read the superhero tales that we fight evil, and the generation that would listen to good music, the protest, like the punk, skinhead, when skinhead used to be good, the heavy metal, the whole thing that they probably created to try to indoctrinate, or like try to, let's give them a lot of escapism, so they don't realize what we are actually doing. So let's keep them in the haze. Uh, you know, that's my generation. We are the good stuff generation. Good stuff, good music, good people, good times generation. And that's what we can give to the kids. We can show them that it's much more than just hard work and working like a slave. And this is why they won't let, because we fought them back in the days. You know, we put the police to run. We destroyed one of their biggest things, that was the keeping price of buildings high by not letting anyone live in them. We ruined that for them. So we were showing our potential, how we could ruin their little games. And this is why they don't want us in power, because once we are in power, we're probably going to do some pretty good stuff, and they can't let it. So they will rather try to hire people who are under their absolute control, like Cortez, for instance. You know, they will make selections to hire people from other generations to make sure that my generation don't get a share of it. Because I think they still don't forget the whole punk and anarchy thing of the 80s that we went through. That really, really scared them, because it was our scream of "it's forbidden to forbid" that they couldn't let happen. So yeah, let's pray that they don't decide to go out with a bang, because they might consider it. And get ready, because once they all retire, they are going to make sure that there are sanctions to people who don't do absurd things, as to visit them in the mental institutions they are probably at. Yeah, there's a lot to be done. But now you know a little more where all the problems are coming from, and the boomers themselves. It is really a generational issue. It's not, and it's the mindset of an entire generation, not of my generation, not of X Geners or Y Geners or the millennials. I don't blame the millennials. I don't believe for a minute that the millennials are dumb and all that. They are a consequence of a failed educational system, implemented and reinforced and enforced again and enforced several times over, to the point of drugging kids in classrooms to keep them quiet, done by boomers. Not by my generation, by the generation previous. Let that sink in. You will have to face that entire generation. God forbid if they feel threatened somehow, because they might decide to go out nuclear. So nobody gets it, only they. It's a possibility. They are that crazy. As a child from, you know, as a child that had to be raised by them, I know. They are that crazy.